All right, good evening, everyone. This is a special meeting of Livingston's Planning Board, and notice of this meeting has been distributed in compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act. Mr. Diner, Ms. Cucci, and Mrs. Santola are not present this evening. Mr. Klein? Here. Mr. Ratner? Here. Mr. Reber?
Here.
Mr. Lewis?
Here.
Ms. Bagoli?
Here.
Ms. Vishnu?
Here.
Mr. Fernandez?
Here.
We have a quorum. We have our board attorney, and we have Catherine Madry, also from the planning department.
Thank you very much. Can you please call the first matter?
I'll know for the record that Mr. Reber is going to be recused from this matter, Mr. Chairman. That matter is a continued hearing for preliminary and final site plan with variances for 389-405 East Mount Pleasant Avenue, Block 2100, lots 22 through 25, 35.01, 35.02, 35.03, for application number 2022-65-PFSPV, Mount Pleasant Partners LLC.
Thank you. This is a resolution. I have it on. Good? That the board on April 18th gave non-binding guidance to prepare a resolution in this matter. Resolution was prepared. There are a couple of just cleanup, non-substantive changes from the draft that was circulated, but there are 3 more substantive changes. Just want to go through them. Number 1 deals with lofts and dens, and allowing doors, but not closets, and the doors need to be at least 70% clear glass. A door on a loft or a den or a closet, but not both. That's one of the changes. The second change has to do with phasing, and we propose the following language. The applicant may propose a phasing schedule to the township engineer. If the schedule is agreed to, the full text must be set out in the final plans, and I think that will address any phasing concerns that the developer has. The third one had to do with the tree ordinance, and that's, since we don't have jurisdiction over that, that's really not something that we have to address. Were there any other concerns from any of the board members prior to taking a vote on this? Hearing none, can I have a motion then to approve?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Jackie, do you want to take the roll when you get a chance?
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Ms. Bagoli?
Yes.
Mr. Klein?
Yes.
Mr. Ratner?
Yes.
Ms. Vishnu?
Yes.
Chairman Fernandez?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you. All right, so that takes care of that. We have 2 hearings scheduled for this evening. In order to reach both of them, we'll probably, we'll allow hopefully we can finish the first one within the first hour or so. If we're not finished by then we will be moving on to the second hearing, which is on for this evening. So we will be getting to both. The timing, not sure, but we will be reaching both, and hopefully we're able to finish the first one before we reach the second one. So if you can call the first matter. Oh, there you go.
The next matter scheduled is preliminary and final site plan for 650 South Orange Avenue, Block 7001, Lot 1.01, application number 2011-58-PFSP, amendment number 2 for 18 Corp.
Thank you. Welcome. And if I can have your appearance, please.
Sure. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, professionals, and staff. My name is Carly Clinton, and I'm an attorney from Skank, Price, Smith & King. It's Clinton, C-L-I-N-T-O-N. I represent the applicant 18 Corp. We're here tonight to seek amended preliminary and final site plan approval for signage, which includes installation of a second building-mounted sign and a monument sign along South Orange Avenue. The subject property is identified as Block 7001, Lot 1.01, and is situated in the R5F Residence District. As some of you may remember, we were before the board in 2019 and received approval in a resolution dated April 16, 2019, which permitted the installation of an internally illuminated 7 feet high by 10 feet wide building-mounted sign. This sign is proposed to remain. The applicant seeks variance approval to install a second sign on the building facade, which will be non-illuminated and will measure 10 inches tall by 17 feet wide, and the sign will read, "The Howard J. Cooperman Campus." The applicant also seeks variance to approve and install a monument sign, which will be situated to the west of South Orange Avenue and measure 4 feet 11 inches tall and 5 feet 4 inches wide. So we're seeking variance relief. We're seeking 3 variances, but we're actually going to modify the monument sign to include the street number, which should eliminate one of the variances that we're requesting. We're requesting a variance for the setback for the monument sign. And we're also requesting a variance which states that mounted signage is not allowed in the residence district, the R5. I have Rabbi Solomon here. He's joined us this evening. He's in the audience. And at this time, I'd like to introduce Edward DeZuzio from Butler Sign Company, who will discuss and provide details regarding the monument sign for its design. If I can call him up at this time.
Sure, and just to go through general procedure for tonight's hearing. As you see, the applicant is represented by an attorney who has explained the application. The applicant's attorney will call one or more witnesses to give sworn testimony in support of the application, and members of the board may ask the witness questions. When the attorney for the applicant has no more questions for a witness, interested parties in favor of or in opposition to the application may question the witness about the witness's testimony. At this part of the proceeding, only questions about what the witness has testified may be put forward. When all the applicant's witnesses have testified and have been questioned, if there's any entity or group formally appearing as a party in support of or in opposition to the application, that party may call witnesses. And when all the witnesses of all the parties have been heard, members of the public may give sworn statements for or against the application. Thank you for allowing me to go through that. And yes, you may call your first witness. Thank you.
Thank you. So Edward, would you like to come up?
Yeah, come on up. Don't be shy.
Okay, Edward, if you want to just state your last name for the record, you can go up there.
Edward DeZuzio, D-E-Z-U-Z-I-O, Butler Sign Company, Wayne, New Jersey. Industry professional, grew up in the business since the age of 13. I chair a committee on workforce development and safety for the World Sign Association, and published articles on 3 continents in 5 languages.
Okay. And Edward,
If we can just have swear.
sure.
Got a little bit ahead of us. You raise your right hand. You swear the testimony given in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth.
I do.
Give us your full name and your affiliation to the record.
Edward DeZuzio, Butler Sign Company.
Okay.
Okay, and Edward, you have fully reviewed the plans that we've submitted and that you are familiar with the sign that you're going to be testifying to, correct?
I am.
Okay. You could just give an explanation to the board about the sign, the specifics and the materials.
It's an internally illuminated sign. The letters themselves will be illuminated. The background is not. It's opaque. It will not be very bright. It will be fabricated to meet UL 48 specifications, installed for National Electric Code Article 600. It incorporates a stone base, which would complement the building, and freestanding on site.
And you have with you tonight a sample of the illumination, right? Correct?
I do.
You could just show the board. We have a sample of what the illumination would look like on the monument sign. That's what it would look like.
That's the actual light source, but assembled within the sign. That's the actual brightness.
Can't work that.
That's a very interesting exhibit. It really helps us understand things. Too bad you can't leave it here for us.
Lumens and watts and per foot, yeah, it gets very confusing. Picture's worth 1,000 words.
And if you could just
Will that be
testify,
illuminated all the time? When will it be on and off?
It can be on a timer, it can be on a solar cell. Timer's probably preferred by all parties.
if you could just testify in the record for the dimensions of the sign?
Sure. Can I bring the,
Sure,
can
you
I
can
bring
bring up.
drawings up?
Sure.
Do they magically appear? There we go.
There we go.
Okay. So that is the sign and the placement, as seen from the traffic light. It's approximately 5 feet wide and 3 feet 7 inches tall. That's the sign itself. The base is an additional 18 inches by 64 inches.
What's the overall height?
From grade, it would be, yes, thank you. Yep. 4 feet 11 inches
Thank
from
you.
grade, yeah.
So I'd like to open up any questions the board has for Edward.
Just real quick, looking at the sign, the exhibit that you showed us only had the Chabad at Short Hills. Is the other lettering going to be illuminated similarly?
Correct.
Okay.
Everything that's white that you
It's
see
gonna be
will
the
be
same, okay.
illuminated, yes.
So you're adding the address or just the,
We're going to add 650,
sorry, I forgot to turn on my microphone. So you're adding the full address or just a number?
just the street number, so 650.
Okay.
And we can submit a revised drawing to the board as a condition of approval if allowed.
Where will the address be added? About where?
We'd like to keep it on the stone base, close
Okay.
to the street. There are options. One option would be on the end of the sign so that it is parallel with Mount Pleasant. Other options would be to include it on the sign itself so that it would be illuminated.
What are you proposing of those options?
On the stone itself,
And that would not be illuminated if it's on the
it would
stone?
not be illuminated.
Do you have approximate size of the lettering?
I'm going to say 4 inches based off of the largest letter there.
That's 4 inches in height and,
4 inches in height. If you look at the CHA, it'd probably be approximately those same dimensions. Same physical presence on the sign.
Is somebody going to be testifying as to the setback?
Correct, yes. We have Michael Lafonski here. If there's no more questions for Edward, I'd like to call up our next.
I'd like to offer an observation on the sign, and
Sure.
then you can decide how to deal with it. The only monument sign that would be prohibited, or permitted rather, in that zone would be for housing that hasn't been built. But it does have a dimensional standard, which is 4 feet maximum height, 20 square feet overall area. As far as the sign itself is concerned, Livingston has traditionally granted permission for houses of worship to have identifying monument signs containing the name of the congregation and religious identification or symbols. This seems to be a different kind of monument sign in terms of its content. So somebody is going to have to explain to us why this particular sign, which would be different than apparently all others in the town, should be approved. You don't have to do that now. I assume you'll have somebody who will.
Yes, and I also have Rabbi Solomon here if we'd like to bring him up as well.
I have a question on the building signage. That's not going to be illuminated, right?
No, our next, I'll be calling up Don
The next
Fan. He'll
person,
be
okay.
explaining that sign.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the board? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, at this time, I'd like to call up Don Fan, and Don is from Prolific Design Group. He is going to speak about the building mounted sign. Who's going to be coming up now?
Raise your right hand.
Good evening.
You swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Give us your full name and your affiliation.
Don Phan,
You spell that?
Dungphan.
You can put your hand down.
Getting tired. Thank you.
Okay. You
So-
just describe to the board the sign, its dimensions, and just the material.
Should I speak? Okay.
Yes, please.
Yeah, the signs that we came up with are pretty simple. Basically, it just, like you said, it's just a black, the material will be aluminum, and with black painted, and it's non-illuminated. So it's very similar to the one right next to it. It says Shabbat at Short Hills. That's the same exact material, same exact finish, just smaller. Good. Rabbi Solomon want that sign to be the same as the ones that existed, so there'd be non-conflict between the two signs, side by side.
If you could just describe the dimensions to the
The
board.
dimension is 10 inch, like the letter T is 10 inches tall, and the overall width, the Howard J. Cooperman campus is 17 feet long.
Okay. Are there any questions for Don?
So what's the additional benefit? Because we have the monument sign, and then it looks like we also have a wall sign not too far from that. So what's the purpose of having two signs very close to each other?
Sure. So the family had donated to the Chabad, and so it's a recognition of the family for naming of the campus. So it's just a recognition, and it's something that the family had requested. And so it's just to recognize that.
The family requested that it be placed twice.
It's just that it's, on the facade and then also on the monument sign, so just two places, yes.
Okay, I would like to go back to the exhibit that's up there now. And it's described as the lettering of the proposed wall sign matching the existing sign. We also received in our packet a photograph showing the building and the existing sign. The existing wall sign is not the sign that's shown on this diagram. So I'm somewhat confused.
Are you speaking about this photo?
The photo, which is
Yes.
included in the packet, it is a photo of the facade of the building. It includes the banner that is the proposed sign on the wall, and presumably the existing wall sign. The existing wall sign in the photograph is not the sign on this exhibit. Is there a proposal to change the wall sign?
No,
Or is this exhibit wrong?
the sign that's on the building currently is remaining, and it's not proposed to be changed. The only thing we're adding is the second sign, which is the Howard J. Cooperman campus.
If I'm
So
not
that
mistaken,
this
there was,
So the
Exhibit-
photograph is the existing one, that's going to remain?
Yes.
And
That's
the
correct.
consistency is in the font, I guess, for lack of a better word?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so the focus, when we look at this exhibit, is the proposed sign that we should be looking at, not what is the existing sign.
Correct. The building will remain, everything will remain as is, except the addition of the Howard J. Cooperman campus sign.
Okay.
Are there any other questions for Don?
Anybody?
I don't know, I think you mentioned the rabbi. I don't know if he was being tendered as an expert. Is he an architect, design, he's from a design group, or we
From
didn't
the
get
design- from
any
the sign.
qualifications or anything?
You know, I don't think you've offered any experts so far.
Not yet. The next
Correct.
will be expert.
Okay.
Right. From a prolific design group.
Correct,
Right.
yes, that's from Don.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
Any other questions?
No.
Great, thank you very much.
okay. So next, I'd like to call up Mike Lazanfama from Casey and Keller Incorporated, who will discuss and provide details regarding the proposed facade sign and address those comments and concerns from the board and township professionals. And he'll be as an expert.
Can you swear Mike in?
Swear the testimony you're about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. My name is Michael Lanzafama. That's Lanzafama. I'm a licensed professional engineer, land surveyor, and planner, licensed in the state of New Jersey. I'm a principal with the firm of Casey and Keller Incorporated, 258 Main Street, Millburn, New Jersey. Let me just get
You being offered as an expert in
in engineering and planning.
engineering and planning. Any questions from the board? Okay, thank you.
Okay, let me
Accepted as an expert in engineering and planning.
Okay, let me just get to my drawings. Give me a second. Okay. So the property in question is 650 South Orange Avenue. As we all know, it's the Chabad that has existed there for some time now. This is on block 7001, lot 1.01. It's in the R5F residential zone, which does permit houses of worship as part of the permitted uses. One of the key elements here is its location along South Orange Avenue at its intersection with White Oak Ridge Road. The signage that we're proposing, both the monument sign as well as the wall-mounted sign, I think provides for identification and a sense of community. The names that are being incorporated onto the signage of the building and the monument sign are those of donors that have participated in this religious community. And it gives people, as I said before, a feeling of community, a sense of place where they can gather and with friends that they know, and the names that have become very familiar in this area of Essex County. The Pantiers and the Coopermans are well known throughout these communities of Short Hills and Livingston. The property surrounding this particular signage that we're proposing, as you can see from the exhibit, immediately across the street from the wall-mounted sign is the Exxon gas station. And the monument sign is located towards the east of the entry drive to the gas station. Further to the east are nothing but wooded areas, so none of the signage would have a detrimental impact on the vista of residential properties located immediately across South Orange Avenue. As you heard from the earlier testimony, the signs are conforming as to size with regard to the monument sign. There are monument signs in the original ordinance that were permitted for the market rate property that was never built. So we are proposing a sign that would be similar in size to what would have been permitted had this been a market rate building, but is not located in accordance with the zoning. The zoning requires that the sign be located a minimum of 17 and a half feet from the right-of-way line of South Orange Avenue. If you, let me get over to the site plan itself. And let me just bring that over. We're getting there. There we go. Okay, so the proposed monument sign is being set back 9 feet from the right-of-way line of South Orange Avenue. The traveled way is an additional 10 feet. So that would put the sign about 19 feet back from the traveled way. If we set the sign back according to the ordinance, the sign would not be visible from South Orange Avenue for motorists traveling east and west along the avenue. Part of the purpose of the sign is to help motorists identify the location, the entry drive, and it provides for an element of traffic safety, allows motorists to quickly identify the locale and be able to move quickly into the site off of South Orange Avenue. So, in my opinion, the granting of the variance as it relates to the monument sign and its setback, in my opinion, can be granted as a C2 variance, which is often referred to as the flexible C variance. And that is that the benefits outweigh any detriments. As we talked about it, the positive criteria or the benefits from having a monument sign such as this is one of traffic safety in my mind. It allows for quick identification of the property from the roadway. And the detriments in my mind are few, if any. The properties immediately across the roadway are commercial in nature and or wooded. So the sign, even though it is illuminated, would not have a detrimental impact on the adjoining properties. So in my opinion, this could be granted without substantial detriment to the public good. And as I stated earlier, the desire to have the names of the Coopermans and Pantiers on the sign is important. I think it, as I said earlier, it allows for a sense of community, and I think that is significant in a religious environment. As far as the Howard Cooperman sign along the building facade, as you know, building facade signs are not permitted in this zone for this use. We were granted the original Chabad sign back in 2019. It was literally a part of the facade. It was almost like completion of the architecture. And I think the Howard Cooperman sign, although it's not as significant as the Chabad sign with the flame, it is important to have. And it has so little impact, as you saw from the earlier exhibits. Let me see if I could find that. One, is that the one? No, that's not the right one. No. Actually, you could see something here. This is a good image to see, and this is what Mr. Klein was talking about, how this sign is somewhat different from what you saw earlier. And you could see how that sign complements the architecture of that facade. And adding the Howard Cooperman to the right, and it's only 10 inches high, granted it's 17 feet long. The overall building facade area is over 1,700 square feet. So the total of the Chabad sign, which was approved at when you put a box around the total image of 70 square feet, and the additional signage for the Howard Cooperman sign, that still would put the percentage of the area of the facade only at about 4.8%. So it's not a significant element. It's not illuminated, so I don't see that as having a detriment to the public good. Again, I think it's important to have these types of signs, especially on a religious institution such as this. And I don't see any detriment to the public good or the intent and purpose of your zone plan. Again, the Howard Cooperman sign would be under the C2 criteria, having the benefit of creating place and community and not having a detrimental impact on any of the public across the roadway. And that's basically our presentation, and I'd be happy to respond. I'm sure Mr. Klein will have a few questions.
I have one to start with, Mr. Alonso. If I'll just repeat the setback on the distance for the sign, the monument sign.
The sign is proposed at 9 feet from the right-of-way of South Orange Avenue, where 17 and a half feet is required. So we're seeking an 8.5-foot variance on the setback of the sign from South Orange Avenue.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And you're proposing both of these signs under C2?
Both signs, in my opinion, would fall under the C2 criteria. I believe that the benefit to the traveling motorists for the monument sign is important, and that would outweigh any detriment. And it's important, the monument sign itself needs the variance, but also the setback. So I think under both of those elements can be approved as a C2. And because if you look at the photograph that you see there, and you look at some of the vegetation immediately to the east of the driveway, if that sign were pushed back another 8.5 feet, it'd be basically right up against the building. And motorists heading west on South Orange Avenue would never be able to see it.
Any other questions from the board? Seeing none.
He's just getting warmed up.
I didn't think Peter was only going to have one.
Again, we have a policy of approving monument signs for houses of worship at locations where monument signs are not ordinarily permitted.
Correct.
And generally, those signs have always been those messages which contain the name of the congregation and some way of identifying the religious identity of the organization, or by words or by symbols.
Correct.
The first thing I have on the name here is that Short Hills is all lowercase. I don't know if that was intended or not.
I didn't design the sign.
So I'm not sure it has the correct name of the congregation. Putting that aside, if you look at all the other information that's on there, I think you have to do a little bit more of explaining to us just what criteria for a variance are being justified.
Well, that's what I was talking about as far as a sense of place, a sense of community. I think having the names of these families on the sign are recognized by many of the members of the congregation, as well as the Livingston and Short Hills Millburn population overall. They're both longstanding members of the community that have been involved in many philanthropic endeavors, and here allowing them to have their family memorialized on these signs, I think, is appropriate. And I don't think it causes any detriment to the public good or the intent and purpose of your zone plan. The sign, the way it's oriented, and the existing uses across South Orange Avenue would not be negatively impacted by this. And you could see, even when we zoom in, it won't zoom in, why won't it zoom in? 'Cause my hands are, well, anyway. I was trying to blow that up and show you that the text on the sign I think is proportional and appropriate. And the sign is not overpowering. It's not overly high. It's only 4 foot 11 inches in height, approximately 5 feet across. In my mind, it serves a purpose. It serves a purpose of identifying a house of worship that is affiliated with these two families.
I will certainly agree that it is a great tribute to someone who has contributed so much to its community and to someone who attends shul myself. We all see that we walk in and there's a tree of life, and usually there's a donation of which family contributed to the well-being and welfare of that the congregation. For me, just having it twice, I do feel the sense of community and unity and certainly gratitude that comes from the membership when someone comes forth and says, we want you here, we belong, and gives that sense. Totally agree with that. For me, it's just a little bit doubly putting it on the sign. I don't know how that's a community benefit,
Right.
bringing a sense of
Well,
community and benefit.
The sizes of the signs, too, I think are appropriate. And when we looked at the Howard Cooperman sign on the rest of the facade of the South Orange Avenue frontage, it does look like it completes the facade to some sense. You do have that kind of barren area just to the west of the Chabad sign. So it's the same type of lettering as the prior witness had testified to. So I get your point. It's a desire that we wish to have for this facility. And it doesn't really, in my mind, has no detrimental effect whatsoever to the adjoining properties. You're looking at the Exxon station in some wooded area. And being able to identify it and honor these families, I think, in my mind, is justified.
I don't know if this question's actually for you or it might be for the rabbi, just for my understanding. What is the Howard Cooperman campus? Is that everything on the whole site? And then what is the Pantier building? Is that a separate building? And where I'm coming from, just so you know, and again, operationally, is I certainly understand where the wall-mounted signs being parallel to South Orange Avenue are not the best. You usually don't see it until you're practically up on the building, so there's a benefit to having that. Generally, the benefit, in addition to honoring somebody, but more from a purely practical standpoint, is to see it, to know that's where you need to turn in. So my question is geared towards, are people coming here likely to be told to come to the Pantier building as opposed to the Chabad at Short Hills? So if they're driving along and they don't see that and they only see Chabad, then they don't turn in?
I
You know, is
think
this
that would have to
directional?
be a question for the rabbi.
Okay.
I don't know the answer to that.
Hey, Mike, I go to, a synagogue. We don't have, we have a lot of names on the walls and things. But if the reason for the sign is to say this is Chabad, or the shul, then make that sign a little bit longer, a little bigger, because I can't see what the building is, from the sign. Like just now, if I'm driving down, I can't, it's so small. So I agree with what you're hearing is, I have no problem putting their names on the building. That's very commonplace. I don't mind, but not, I would just have the sign say Chabad, maybe the flame, maybe the number. I agree. That's telling everybody where it is. But I just don't, we're putting too much on the sign, my humble opinion.
And can I just add one thing to that? It's also, I recognize how generous the Coopermans and
100%.
the Pantiers are, but there's, other synagogues in town have the same situation, and isn't this going to start setting a precedent that those families will want to be, since it's not the way? I mean, I think I get the whole community thing, the Chabad, love the flame. I know it's a wonderful, house of worship. I think on the walls enough, on the buildings enough.
I would not have any objection to having identification of the donors on a good-sized plaque adjacent to the door to the building. That would achieve recognition without raising the problems that some of the other people are raising at this point.
So it seems to be the concern is the names of the donors on the monument sign. Am I getting that correct?
I
So
think that's
it-
the concern, and also to Dr. Reber's point, I think the gentleman testified that the biggest letters on the sign are 4 inches, which means some of these others are probably like 2 inches. And I question, when are you going to be able to read that coming down the road? The idea of
Correct.
identifying something is that you're far enough away to know in advance, that's where I'm going. And having this many letters on there necessarily drives them to be smaller letters, and I wonder if that kind of defeats the purpose of having a sign there for people to see.
I would agree. I think that I do get the sense of honoring, like I said before, but I think that having them on the doors when you walk in is just as equally a bigger recognition, because you walk in through the doors and you see they may have been provided by some very, generous congregants. But I agree that maybe you can't see that sign for its
Right.
intended purpose.
The monument sign could be very effective if you had large letters identifying the congregation and even had the flame on it.
Right.
The
Have
sign
the
can be big
650
enough
and
to
the
do
flame.
that.
Well, to respond to Mr. Lewis's question, I don't know if we should hear from the rabbi as to whether or not they often refer to the building now as the Cooperman campus, because, excuse me, then it would be important to have the name either on the building or in the sign. So, hate to put you on the spot, Rabbi, but.
And before we move on, is there anybody from the public that has any questions for any of these 3 witnesses that have already testified? Okay, great. Just wanted to get that out of the way. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, but they're,
Testimony you're about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes, I do.
Your full name for the record?
Mendel, Mendel. Last name Solomon, Solomon.
okay.
If you could just respond to the question that was presented by Mr. Lewis about the family and the name of the campus.
Okay. Specifically to that, sure. So this was a work in progress. I guess it's best understood in the context of how Chabad runs vis-a-vis possibly a standard house of worship. It's structured. I won't say what others are, I can just tell you what we are. It's structured in a manner in which the funding usually comes from 1 or 2 families. The greater funding, most Chabad houses, thousands around the world, will be endowed by either the name of the Chabad, which we didn't do because it's still generic. It's not like called the Howard Koopman Chabad. It's not, it's still Chabad. But under that, you sell different things that help pay for the expense of the undertaking. And so therefore, we have the building itself was made possible by the Pantera family, and they were the ones who were part owners of the property prior. They're the ones who endowed the building for their parents. But then afterwards, when we had the campus dedication, which most Chabads do, which incorporates the entire landscape of what belongs to 18 Corp Chabad, Mr. Koopman was approached, and he said he would love to do it, but he wants to do it for his brother, who had just passed away, whom we actually housed his funeral in the Chabad itself, because that was the type of relationship. And he shared that his brother was in a very public man, but didn't get the recognition, certainly not the way the other Leon and Toby has and does. And he wanted to do something that was very meaningful to him, so that when he drove up and down South Orange Avenue, which was his road, his life, that people would see that he left an indelible impact. And so therefore, he asked that the signage, if we could get recognition of the signage, be to where it was. And I said, well, certainly, I would be agreeable to that as long as, we could get it passed. And so the structure, it doesn't belong Like, I don't think you'll find most temples where you'll have one name of this temple belonging to this family. It's different. You'll have almost every single thing within the temple, the classroom, the sanctuary, every aspect, I won't say doorknob, but every aspect is tried to be dedicated to incorporate everybody as much as we can. So these were the two families that came about. The Pantiers were initially. Mr. Koopman was only as of last summer. He was very graciously, he loved the idea, and he had requested if I could honor his brother that way. And he shared with me that he let the township know that in a positive way. When we were talking about it, my brother was an honorable vet, American vet, did a lot for this country, and it would be very meaningful to his brother's memory and to him to have this sign there. In terms of the signage being on the sign itself, I think that came, meaning the naming, that being on the sign itself, the monument sign, it came about because the Pantier family, being just totally transparent, the Pantier family did everything to make this possible. And you really only see their name if you're coming down South Orange Avenue going west. And so there is really, that's great recognition for them, but then when you have the Koopman sign on a place where both sides can see it, I wanted to do something to honor them, because to recognize their involvement, their input, and to, yes, I'll put the Koopman name higher because it was a greater dedication, but they can both be recognized over here. And I approached them both. They said it would be very meaningful, and they thanked me for it as long as we could get it passed. So that's essentially how that came about. Does that address all?
Are there any other questions or comments from the board?
Well, the one question I had was from a zoning perspective and granting a variance and public benefits, the monument sign, in my view, the purpose of it is so that motorists driving down the road can see where the building is and that's where they want to turn, rather than wait till they get immediately adjacent to the building and look on the wall. So to me, then, the information has to be relevant to that. And so that's why my question was trying to distinguish between the Chabad and the campus and the family building, and whether they're all in the same building or are these separate buildings, and are some people being told, come and this is such a date and time at the Pantier family building, and so that's what they're going to be looking for, or is it, that's what I'm trying to understand, because I don't see like three different buildings.
No, there is one building,
Right.
one main building. The campus incorporates everything outside of the building. Like we have the back part of the building, the playground is dedicated to somebody else, but I don't have that sign going up. It's just an internal sign within. This was to the two major donations that helped create this community center, a synagogue, and for the most part, people may refer to it differently, I don't know, but in terms of having it recognized as the Koopman family, the Howard J. Koopman campus, this is something that we wanted to identify. We put it on every letterhead we have. We put it on every communication email that goes out. Every one of them has it. Not one, and that was part of the agreement that I had with them as well. So it is more than just, recognized that way. People do know it that way, but I can't speak to, I never asked anyone in terms of if they would pull it or not, whether they identify with it or not.
It looks like you're working up a question.
I think what I hear from what you said is that if this were called the Howard J. Koopman Chabad campus, it would be consistent with approaches elsewhere. But even the way it's done here, it's not consistent with other Chabad operations.
Then I misquoted. That wasn't what I was trying to convey. That in most temples or synagogues anywhere, you usually don't see the name, but in Chabad you do. You will see let's say Chabad of Nashville, this and this campus. I've been to hundreds all over. They will have it on their signs, whereas most temples and churches, you won't have it. So that is consistent with the way Chabad is, because it's created and funded specifically and uniquely by specific families, unlike a congregation that it's all generic and everyone.
You happen to have a dynamic operation going there.
Thank you.
And it's very welcome in the community. You can understand the problem that we're having in terms of the zoning issues that we have to address.
I appreciate that, and I want to take a moment to thank you, because It's really been a pleasure all this time working with you and with the board and just be accommodating these two towns primarily. And so no matter the decision, I appreciate it. I hope it's a positive one for the people who are making this possible. But either way, I thank each and every one of you.
Are there any other questions from the board?
I just want to thank the rabbi for sharing that very touching message with us.
Thank you.
Rabbi, the sign on the wall is really not for identification for a driver going in either direction because it's parallel to the road as opposed to the monument sign, which has visibility from both directions. So its function is to honor the donor in that particular case, in my view. Is that pretty much the story there? In other words, if you didn't have the sign on the wall, it wouldn't affect the people coming to the Chabad from either directions as far as where to turn, where to stop, and where to be. And which is, I don't believe, common in town, putting the names of principals on a monument sign. But I understand it here. But I don't really know that, in my view, that the sign on the wall serves any practical purpose. Practical in quotes.
I can speak to that. Yeah, thank you.
Michael Anzafama. So it does serve purpose. As Rabbi pointed out in response to Mr. Lewis's question about the identification, he says the Howard Cooperman family is on their letterhead. So people might be able to help identify the building. Maybe they remember it in their mind as, oh, I have to go to the Howard Cooperman campus rather than the Chabad. So seeing it, granted, it's parallel to the street, but it's in a location that's up high enough, it might assist. But you're absolutely right. It's not its primary purpose. Its primary purpose is to honor the family, be tasteful, and not be offensive to the neighborhood. And that's what it's all about.
Do we know what
Yes.
do we know what the site distance is of the monument sign? What distance is it legible to drivers?
The monument sign, as you know, South Orange Avenue is a straight run through there. So in its proposed location, it's hard to say because of the sizes of the letters, the Chabad lettering. I would say it's probably visible. When I drove it yesterday and again today, I got a sense of, I was probably about a football field away, so about 300 feet easily. I would be able to identify it. I grant that I didn't have a model of the sign there, so it's just my personal opinion. I don't have a metric to give you exactly.
But you're not going to see a 4-inch high letter
Well,
at that distance.
you would be able to identify and make out the Chabad, certainly, especially at night when it's illuminated. You would be able to see that. And that would certainly give you some indication that perhaps this is the location that I'm looking for, is it would certainly be visible.
So at this point, the proposal is that there be 2 recognitions on the building itself, one on the wall that's being proposed and one on the other wall where the entrance is, and then each recognition would be repeated on the monument sign.
That's correct.
Is there any possibility that the problem could be resolved, the concerns of the board could be resolved by saying that there could be the 2 wall signs, but that the monument sign just identify the religious purpose of the building?
as much as the mortgage payments are dependent upon me, I don't make that decision. And it's been very much, this has been a personal request because of the uniqueness of this dedication. And I'm trying to do the right thing by both families so it could be visible. So I would really prefer to go back and see what we could do to.
Yeah.
I think that's a good idea, since you understand that we're trying to find a way to accommodate the needs as well.
Yeah, so we did get some great feedback from the board tonight, and we're going to certainly review and revise and see what we can come up with. So we'd like to postpone. Understood, yeah. Okay.
And just my 2 cents too on the sign, it seems that dividing it in half is part of what shrank all the letters. So you might consider putting the Chabad on the top, and whether anything's allowed on the bottom or not, you could get much bigger Chabad letters.
We
on the top.
actually did.
Okay.
And believe it or not, I'm somewhat OCD into this detail. I am like, and I played with it for 3 weeks, and it was more visual this way, at least the way it's structured, because on top it just looked like 3 layers and you couldn't really make out. This way, at least there was a divider there to my eye, but thank you.
I think what we're, I think what we're hearing and saying is that, just the difficult, what purpose is it serving for identifying where you're going? And I think maybe if we can kind of think that through, that may be helpful, to the board.
Okay.
Great. Well, thank you so
Thank
much
you,
for your
yeah.
time tonight. Yeah. And do we have a future date that we can?
Yes, that's, what are you looking at me for? Yeah, that's quite a look you're giving me. Is there a date that we can announce, and just to keep it on the calendar?
Mr. Chairman, let's consider Tuesday, July 18th, and that's another special hearing.
July 18th?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so, yeah, right. So July 18th,
Yes.
7:30? All right, so we
7:30.
continue till then. No further notice will be required. Anybody from the public that is here, this is your notice that this matter is continued until the 18th.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the great presentation, and thank you to all the witnesses. It was truly appreciated. Thank you. Let me just clean up.
The next matter scheduled for this evening is preliminary and final site plan with variances. This is a reopened hearing for 212, 214, and 222 North Livingston Avenue, Block 1706, lots 1, 2, and 55. Application number 2013-22-PFSPV, an amendment for Umdivia Realty LLC.
Thank you. And just for a little background, this application sought an amendment from a previous resolutions adopted by this board, previous resolution adopted by this board on May 6, 2014, and which was later amended by a resolution dated November 9, 2017. This application sought only one variance for an existing on-site shed. Hearings on this application took place on October 18th, 2022, December 20th, 2022, and February 7th, 2023, at which time the evidentiary record was closed. After the record was closed, we had a request to reopen the matter, which was granted by this board. Just to summarize, the application that was presented by the applicant asked for, and it was really summarized in council's letter of January 26, 2023. So what had been requested from this board was, number one, a variance to continue to use the existing accessory structure, number 2, to amend the prior approval of 60 seats inside, and this is for the tenant restaurant, and 66 outside, to now, and the request was to permit 79 seats inside, and that was per the fire code measurement, with seating outside for not more than a total of 120 seats total. There was a withdrawal for a request of an illuminated sign. I think that there was an agreement reached on what that was going to be. Just a reminder that no parking variance is needed. And the sign, the no parking signs that were installed were to be removed, and there were going to be, I believe, 4 allowed in the rear, and they were going to have language limiting the no parking or the parking only for Livingston Mart and L-Town Liquors from 4 o'clock to 7:30. There was an agreement to comply with the prior condition of no outdoor music and to have a parking attendant as needed and during events. So I think that's what the application was requested, right? And then there were some other things that came up during the meeting, during the hearings as well, about repairing some, some spot, I think a light that had come down. It was all in the previous draft, and also removal of all spotlights in compliance with the lighting plan. So with that, I know that Mr. Davidson, as counsel for the applicant, has asked for this hearing to be reopened, which this board agreed to, so I will let Mr. Davidson move forward and then see if there are any other appearances for, on the matter.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Your summation is accurate. We asked that the board decided in its wisdom to, at least where currently, that the 79 people on the inside would only be from November through February. November, December, January, February. The rest of the time, the previous resolution that was approved back in 2014 would be applied. The tenant, Asato, who is Sam's tenant, asked that he was not happy with that, and for very pointed economic reasons. And there was also some issues with furniture, et cetera. But Mr. LaPerry was hired by the tenant, and he has prepared a presentation for the board tonight regarding that seating limitation. So if the board would indulge me, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. LaPerry.
So you'd like to enter an appearance on this matter, please?
Yes, please. Thank you. Michael LaPerry. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Mandelbaum Barrett, and I am counsel to Sousa Restaurant Group, LLC, doing business as Asato Steakhouse, which is the applicant, a tenant in the applicant's property that's the subject of this application. So, again, I thank you. I know this is a little unusual. I appreciate you entertaining us and allowing us to provide some testimony. I was really brought in after we reviewed the draft resolution, and after I made an appearance at the April hearing, and this board agreed to allow us to present some testimony, we went back and we decided to take a look at everything as a whole, and I think I could probably go through this very quickly, and I think if everyone would agree, I think we could just maybe, if you'll allow me to just go through my points rather quickly. I think we can come to a resolution and some concessions by Mr. D'Souza, Asato Restaurant Group, so that we could just probably move forward and with hopefully what are just some minor tweaks in the application, or I'm sorry, in the resolution. So When I appeared here in April, I put on the record that I had 3 concerns with the draft resolution, or as the tenant had 3 concerns, and those were, number 1, the limitation on the number of seats and the distribution of indoor and outdoor seating. 2 was the requirement that Asado remove and store off-site furniture as it moves between indoor and outdoor seating, and during the summer months, if they weren't utilizing the outdoor seating, they would have to store it. And also, finally, was the regulation that Asado restrict and be responsible for parking on the street. So as you know, and as Chairman Fernandez summarized, there's a previous approval for 60 indoor, 60 outdoor seats. The resolution as drafted had sort of indicated that for periods of time, instead of having 60 outdoor, 60 indoor, that would only be for the summer months when outdoor was allowed, and then we could move it around to 79. So what we are requesting at this point is sort of a concession, because Mr. D'Souza, he went back and he understands the concerns of the board, and as Mr. Lewis had pointed out at the last hearing is, I guess this board wants some assurances that we're not going to just have, violate it by having extra seats throughout the year, and he wants a way to monitor that. And we agreed that we would look into that, and what we had come up with, and hopefully this board would agree, is that moving forward, if this board is to enter into a resolution, we would like the language in the resolution just be tweaked slightly, just to indicate that we're allowed to have, or Asado would be permitted to have the 79 seats indoors for the year long, all year round, and during the summer months when he is permitted to have outdoor seating, we would restrict that to a maximum of 41 at all times. So during the summer months, at no time would we exceed the 120 seats that are in your resolution. And during the months when summer or outdoor seating is not permitted, we would never exceed the 79 seats. So rather than moving seats around indoor and outdoor, and sometimes we're allowed to have 60 indoor, sometimes we're allowed to have 79 indoor, we'll just restrict it so that the end result is the same. We will never have more than 79 inside, and we will never have more than 41 outside, so it can't exceed the 120 total. And I think that achieves what this board was trying to achieve in the resolution. This way we won't have the number of seats, we won't have any excess seats, and it won't really raise any additional issues. So it's essentially it's the same end result, but it's easier for this board to monitor and to regulate. If we were to be able to do that, this would also restrict the need for Asado to have to be moving tables and chairs around inside and outside and off-site storage, because we would always have the requisite number of seating. Inside it would always be no more than 79 seats, and during the summer months it would be no more than 41 seats, which is the 120 that is permitted anyway. Those are the two of the 3 issues that we came here to discuss. And I think, again, it achieves the same end result. It's just less complicated and provides more assurances that Mr. D'Souza could fill up his restaurant on a daily basis, rather than being restricted to the 60 on the summer months. And finally, the only other issue that we have with the resolution that we'd like to address is the regulation of having a on-site parking attendant monitor the off-site parking. So when we discuss this, it really becomes a logistical issue of we don't really feel like it's a great idea, and the owner doesn't feel comfortable having a parking attendant approach people who are parking, if they're parking illegally or trying to discern where they're coming from, because we really think it might invite some conflict for somebody who's not really trained or required to deal with such conflict. So we don't want a parking attendant that we hire on the weekends, as it was put in the ordinance, to be telling people where they can and cannot park. It's not really the obligation of this tenant to monitor the streets. If an adult wants to come and drive and park illegally, he should be ticketed, he should be towed if that was the case. But this is a township enforcement issue, and we just don't really want to invite that conflict by having a parking attendant try to figure out who's walking here, where they're walking from, approaching people who might be parking on the street that might not be coming to the restaurant. It just really creates a little bit of a nightmare for a business owner. Certainly, we understand that we're not inviting anybody to park off-site, but we just don't want to be tasked with policing the streets to figure out where exactly where the patrons or whomever, who's parking on the streets, whether it's lawful or unlawful. Other than that, Mr. D'Souza has indicated that he could, he'd be okay with the remainder. He understands why the other conditions are on here, and we don't really have a big issue with it. I think at the end of the day, if we were able to just tweak this resolution slightly, it will not have as big of a burden on Mr. D'Souza. We discussed this, and I understand, and so does Mr. D'Souza, that this board has an obligation and a duty to protect the residents and to enter into resolutions and decisions that are in the best interest of the people at large, and we certainly understand that. What we're just trying to do by coming here tonight, and I think there was some compromise by Mr. D'Souza as well to saying he would agree to these things, is that we're just trying to avoid any unintended negative impacts on a business owner as a result of limiting and restricting the amount of seating that he's allowed to have, and by forcing him to sort of undertake something he just doesn't feel comfortable as a business owner for doing, because, again. So, in sum, that's really all that we are looking to do. Mr. D'Souza is here to answer questions if you have them of him. I don't really know that it's necessary to bring him up and have him testify. I think it's basically just a little bit of a language issue, and based upon some of the testimony that was provided at the prior hearings, we're just asking for a tweak of the resolution. The end result, we believe, will be the same. I don't think there's any additional negative impact for what we're requesting. And that's really all that I have.
Mr. LaPari, my understanding of the testimony that we had on this parking attendant was that the individual would be telling people who are parking on the site where they could park. I don't recall it have anything to do with control of what people do if they're not on the site. And obviously, I don't have a copy of the resolution that was drafted in front of me, so I can't look at it. However, I think it might be very helpful if Mr. D'Souza did come in under oath, confirm what you've told us, and there might be some questions for him.
Yeah, we can do that. You can come up here, Wilson, or...
Yeah, come on up
Yeah.
here, that'd be great.
You can sit down with counsel, and you've got a mic that you can share.
I just want to acknowledge that you're still under oath from your prior testimony.
Okay.
Thank you.
I know that there was concern about the issue of having to take furniture off the outdoor seating area during the time period when there was no seating outdoor. And you had said that you could put some things into the shed, which you've asked us to approve for other purposes as well. Obviously, that's not going to hold all the furniture. The building was constructed with 2 canopies as part of the building, which cover part of your outside seating area. Could those spaces under those canopies be used for storage of the furniture from outside when it's past the season for doing that?
We always did that in the past. I think the resolution, I believe that the resolution states that it wants it completely off the property.
It does, but that's why I'm asking you the question. You are able to store it under the canopies
In the wintertime, yes.
in wintertime. Obviously, your business is growing, and you want it to grow. Are you just relying on word of mouth, or are you doing advertising, or what?
It's word of mouth, advertisement, everything.
Advertising works for you?
It does.
You have no problems with it? Because I've heard some businesses complain about things they see in the newspapers and articles and so on that they're not happy with it. You haven't run that problem?
No.
In the testimony at the other sessions, Mr. Patel said that the restaurant opened in 2017. You said that it opened in 2018. Which of you is right?
Well, the restaurant was open as of January 15, 2018.
2018. What made you decide you wanted to be there?
Well, I live in town, so we were always limited to certain cuisines and certain options when it came down to either ordering out or going out to eat. We would have to go to other neighborhoods or surrounding neighborhoods to get certain types of cuisine. So I've been in the Livingston Township for over 12 years now, and I wanted to open something here in Livingston.
So what made you pick this spot?
It was a perfect location. Had the outdoor dining, had a brand-new building. It services West Orange, West Caldwell, Essex Fells, Livingston, Short Hills, so it's a prime location.
I think I understand now. I don't have any other questions at this point.
I have a question that may have been answered in the past, but I don't have the answer to. When you entered into the agreement to lease this property for your business, were you provided with a copy of the planning board's resolution from 2014 with the seating requirements?
Prior for negotiations?
At whichever point were you aware of the requirements set forth by this board back in 2014?
No.
So you,
And I could shed a little bit of light on that, because I read the resolution. I read the resolution myself, too, and it does clearly state 60 outdoor seats. It doesn't clearly state how many are inside. So I know when we spoke first with Mr. DeSouza, he was upfront with me that he knew about the 60 seats, but it wasn't clear to him what was on the inside. And I tend to agree that that's sort of how it reads. It was an attachment to the lease with the 60 outdoor seats.
Yeah.
60 inside, 60 outside. 60 inside, 60 outside. Correct?
Well, I understand that now from having read your resolution this time, but the prior resolution, it wasn't clear in there. It didn't state it at all, actually, that there were 60 indoor seats.
Actually,
It was silent.
No, you probably ought to understand that one of the reasons why we keep asking questions about the seating arrangements and the outdoor seasonal stuff is that the town's ordinance on outdoor seasonal seating was drafted by the planning board, recommended to the town council, and then became the code. So we kind of have a natural inclination to understand what it's all about and why people ask these questions. But another thing that you probably ought to have in mind is that that ordinance gives the restaurateur an option. The restaurateur can go to ask for an annual permit for outdoor seating, which is just limited to 1 year, or can come to the planning board for site plan approval, which obviously is what Mr. Patel chose to do and why we are so much involved in this kind of issue.
Yeah, I understand, Mr. Klein. And, again, I don't know the history like you guys do, okay? I'm coming into it sort of after the fact. So I've been before you guys before. I respect your questions. What I understand, and again, maybe I'm being naive because I'm coming in so late in the game. But what I understand is there was 120 total seats permitted for Mr. D'Souza. We're not trying to exceed that. We're just trying to make sure that it's less of a headache for him and that there's some finality to how many people are going to be in this restaurant. We have the parking, it meets the requirements. We're just asking that instead of having 79 for some part of the year inside, then 60 for some part of the year inside, and 60 outside sometimes, we're just trying to streamline it and make it a definite 79, which meets the fire code requirements inside, and then 41 outside. We're still at the 120. That'll stay. It'll never change. There will never be any violation of the fire code. Now, look, can he put 200 chairs in there? Because I see that seems to be, I'm reading through the lines, that's the concern. If that's the concern, it's not going to change with the resolution. We still have to comply with the resolution. We're just asking if it makes sense.
I think what the concern was that, having the maximum 79 inside and then keeping, because there was testimony, that, having the 79 inside, but still keeping the 60 outside, but limiting the number of diners to 120, and
Right.
that was the concern.
Yeah, and that's why I spoke with Mr. D'Souza, and we came up with this idea to switch that so that it would alleviate the concern, and that's what Mr. Lewis had brought up to me, is that's just,
It
it's
would
asking for
make
trouble.
Make enforcement from the town impossible.
That's correct.
Going in every day and doing a head
Yeah.
count.
I know.
Right, so that was
That's,
the
and
concern.
I heard exactly what Mr. Lewis said, and as soon as I left this hearing, I said to Mr. D'Souza, look, we have to come up with a solution, because they don't want to deal with this, and they don't want to put the burden on their code enforcement to have to deal with this. And that's where Mr. D'Souza and I came up with the idea of, okay, fine, let's allow what we have to stay as the inside, so we're meeting the fire code. Well, we won't have 42 chairs ever outside. Those chairs are going to be restricted to 41. And inside, we're not going to have, 85 chairs. It's going to be restricted to the 79. So that's, I think, in my mind, that sort of eliminates that concern as what we're trying to do. We're trying to figure out what way can we come to an agreement so that this board would be comfortable in allowing that. And again, I think I actually think it's better than having chairs be moved around throughout the year. But that's just my opinion. We were trying to come up with a solution that would appease the board and address the concerns.
And I was also reading the draft, and it says, the applicant also agreed to have an attendant present to direct and control on-site parking on weekend evenings and during any group parties or events. And then I was looking at the conclusion, and we could, probably could draft that better to ensure that it's the on-site, because I think that was always the intent,
Yeah.
was on-site. It wasn't to, go out onto the side streets to direct to have an attendant direct traffic.
Right.
I think the, everybody's intent was to assist in the on-site to make sure that, people, were able to park, people were able to get in. And I think also the removal of a number of those no parking signs would assist, because, and again, just to get back to, no parking variance has been requested here. So the 120 seats plus the liquor store plus the deli, they require 48, they have 48 parking, they require 48, and I think there are 49 on the site. So there isn't, the parking variance is not required, it's just how to, how to better, manage what's there. And also, as part of it, I know that there was going to be an attempt to have the workers do sort of stacked parking to the side and not, try and take up, not take up as many spaces.
That is a problem which we will deal with as we move forward this evening, I think. Is there anything else that we need from Mr.?
No, but I think we need to, since there was testimony, we have to take, if there are any questions from the public.
I'm sorry, I was looking, I did have a question, Mr. D'Souza. I think the one concern, and certainly what I've seen and also heard, is you seem to frequently have outdoor events that have more people than there are seats. And meaning that you have people standing, I don't know, is that the case when if you book an outdoor party? Are you going to limit it to the number of seats that are out there, or is it's 41 seats, but there could be 80 people there and 39 of them kind of just lingering around?
No, so we only book events with, for outdoor seating, for example. It's whatever is there. So if we have 41, or if we're going to be limited to 41, then we would only have 41. Or 35, or whatever it is. Now, if there's people that come from the dining room and they're outside smoking, I mean, that's.
No, I just meant in terms of the events.
In
You're
events,
not
no.
gonna have Okay.
How about music? It's been represented to us that there's still music playing from the outdoor events where the ordinance prohibits music outdoors.
That is false. There's no outdoor music from events at all.
What can you tell us about the tent that's there now, has been for the last month and a half?
Sure, your planning board, your building department issued out a outdoor tent permit for this year. And we have it here on file.
Is that still allowed under the governor's executive order?
Yeah,
Right,
the extent of the outdoor dining and outdoor liquor license service through, I think, the end of this year.
right, so that's allowed under the governor's executive order. to allow, continue to allow outdoor tents.
And I think one of the provisions that we had talked about was that there would be no tents in the future unless there is a state of emergency which is declared and you follow that permit.
Just the tent, I'm asking a question just for my edification, not because I'm saying that it's fact. My understanding is that you have a covered patio outside, or it does cover the majority of the patio outdoors.
It's like a breezeway.
Yeah.
It's like a walkway
So the tent is serving what purpose right now?
from the breezeway onto the patio.
Okay.
Are there any other questions from the board? So with that, are there any questions from the public specifically as to Mr. D'Souza's testimony? If anybody wants to make a sworn statement, you'd have the ability to do that at the end. So right now, our only questions for Mr. D'Souza as to his testimony. That's it.
Question.
Full name and.
I'm sorry,
address.
Gail Kelly, 225 North Livingston Ave.
What was the last name?
Kelly. Okay, it's not a tent for breezeway. It covers the entire,
Question.
why is the tent still up? 1. 2, why is there way more seating than 41 outside? 3, there are parties there with weddings, small weddings with
Do you have
music.
any questions?
Why is there music?
Do you have any questions for, right now, so you can ask questions for Mr. D'Souza.
Music, tent, chairs?
So is there a question that you'd like Mr. D'Souza to answer?
Why is the tent still up? And why is there way more than 41 chairs? And why are there parties that are so loud, still going on?
Well, I think right now, under the prior approval, he's allowed 60 outside. So we can have up to 60 outside under the prior approvals. The tent,
Where is everybody supposed to park with 120 people?
so the 120 seats there with the other uses that are there meet the town's parking requirements.
Our neighborhood and where we get to park. I'm on a busy street,
Right.
so if I have.
Do you have questions for Mr. D'Souza? You'll be able to make statements, sworn statements at the end.
I'll wait for that.
Okay.
So, just to be clear, that Mr. D'Souza's testimony was the tent is up because he's received a permit in accordance with the procedures of the township. He's allowed right now, until this changes, if this ordinance is, or resolution is adopted, he's entitled to 60 seats outside. And as for the noise, I can't comment on that, but there is no outdoor music as of right now, is the testimony.
So, Mr. D'Souza, has there been, your testimony is there has not been outdoor music. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir.
Okay. Please come up.
Tom Eckelman, 4 Mansfield Court,
Can you spell your last name, please?
Ekelman.
Same spelling as last time.
Same spelling. Hi, everybody. Just had a quick question. What is the purpose of speakers outside of your restaurant currently?
So they are up at the moment, but they're not operational at the moment. They are off. We're waiting for the town resolution to be finalized and everything to be done for us to move forward on doing whatever the town asks us to do.
You don't need a resolution to remove those speakers because a prior resolution said they were not permitted.
How long have those speakers been up for?
They've been up since 2018.
The breezeway in question, how many seats are currently under that breezeway in question?
Currently, there's no seats at all under that breezeway.
In terms of the tent, how many seats are under the tent?
Under the tent, there is about 48 seats under the tent, and out of the tent, there's roughly 10 seats, because we have a total of 58 metal seats outside.
May I ask previous testimony, since he's sworn in, just from today's specific, that's the rules?
Yeah, just as to what he's testified, because we've already...
Just this evening?
Yeah.
But since you opened up testimony in full, doesn't that encompass what he previously testified to?
What is...
I was just curious if he's aware of the car accident that happened this weekend as a result of parking on the street.
In the relevancy of that?
Does the relevancy of the second car accident in the last few months, one of which the board member was potentially involved in? Just making sure everyone's aware.
Okay.
That's all.
Thank you.
Won't be penalized for this question. Hi, I'm Ronnie Bonder, 17 Mansfield Court. My question is to Mr. D'Souza. When he first became owner of that restaurant, he was valeting. There were no parking issues, and there were no other issues. When COVID came, everything fell apart, and Mr. D'Souza, who is now still allowed 60 outside and the 79 inside.
Yeah,
No, I'm saying, why don't you reinstate the valet parking? Will alleviate all that congestion around the restaurant, prevent the accidents from happening. I'm sorry, I'm making a statement.
No, but there is an agreement to provide an on-site attendant.
But the on-site attendant, I'm going to tell you, tells them to park elsewhere. Thank goodness the other day, a lady came around in my block and she said...
You'll have a
Okay.
chance at the end to make any
Yeah,
sworn
But
statements.
I'm just saying, it doesn't work.
Okay.
So why not go back to what he had that was working?
Okay, thank you.
John Bonder, 17 Mansfield Court. I'll just follow up on her question. There was valet parking when you first started. Why are you not doing valet parking?
Just so we're clear, Mr. Bonder, the proposed resolution prohibits valet parking on the site, so we would probably be bound by a restriction against it.
Was it,
Is he correct?
I'm curious, the previous valet parking, and I don't know whether Mr. D'Souza is the one to answer that you're referring to, was this valets that took your car and drove it somewhere else? and
Yes,
parked it?
yes.
Okay, not on-site?
No, valet parking
Did you
off-site.
previously have valet parking off-site?
We did have, previously, when we first opened up, we did have a valet service. We were starting to run into issues that a lot of the customers did not want their cars valeted throughout the property, just because of risk factors, and due to COVID, the valet service came out of order, in terms of like the restrictions of coming in, valeting your car, and during COVID. And then we kind of just stopped doing valet service because, we were paying for valet service, and half the time, a lot of the customers did not want somebody else driving their vehicle.
And at the time, the cars were being parked at the Northland Pool parking lot, or?
They were being parked on our lot and off-street. I'm sorry, on the street.
What was that, on-street? Not on our, those cars were not parked on our street when you were doing valet parking. When valet parking was taking place, there were no cars parked on our street. Since you stopped valet parking, there's cars on our street, and your attendant is sending them to our street, and to the local streets. So, so you think you have sufficient parking for that business?
Well,
For that,
yeah, it meets the town, it meets the town ordinance.
you've got 40, and you've got the liquor store, the mart.
There's been testimony during all the hearings that it meets the town ordinance. There is no parking variance requested or required.
I think there was, but.
No, there's not.
You and I, and all of us, may say that the business produces more cars than fit on the property.
Right.
But all the law requires is that there be a certain number of spaces on the property, and that is what they are providing.
So why are 14 spaces reserved for other things? Just open those up to everybody.
That is already covered in this proceeding, and there will be
That,
opportunity.
the resolution, any approval that's granted will require removing the vast majority of those reserved
Yeah,
signs.
but those are illegal signs that shouldn't be there in the
Correct.
first place.
Correct.
So why are
That is
they
why
allowed
the
to be
board is
there?
dealing with it. So
I know, but why are they allowed to be there?
Be patient. You've been patient for a long time.
Yeah, since 2014.
Yeah. And it's been a long proceeding, and we're getting to the end of it. Prayerfully.
I don't have to pray. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from members of the public? Seeing none.
There are noise issues. Why are trucks coming in at 11:30 o'clock at night and picking up things and banging all over the place? No, okay. He doesn't live there, I do.
Yeah, so this is, and again, respectfully, this is supposed to be just questions about the testimony that you provided.
Agreed.
I know you guys testified earlier, and there's been other hearings, and my hope was to not go through everything that happened in the past and try to just restrict it to a couple of comments. So I'd like to keep it that way, if that's possible.
And my concern is, there's a lot of detriments, but there are no benefits to us.
Any other witnesses?
I have no other witnesses.
Are we still talking about just related to tonight's testimony?
Yes.
Kim Cashel, 14 Mansfield Court. Kim Cashel, 14 Mansfield Court. Quick question. How long is the 60-person rule in effect outside?
60 outside since the...
But how much longer?
Yeah, the approval's back in 14.
Okay, that's my question. Thank you.
I have one more question.
Okay.
Of the witness? Okay.
What penalties, if any, have you received from the town as a result of?
Yeah,
I'm
this-
just curious. That's a fair statement. Not?
It doesn't relate to his testimony tonight.
Well, he was testifying that he may or may not have known.
It doesn't relate to his testimony tonight.
Okay. May I ask who approved the tent from the town?
Would have been the building department.
And-
Marty?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was based on the governor's extension of the executive order that supersedes our local zoning and allowed it. not
And there's
just
no
here, but in
discretion
town.
from the town?
No.
How many other tents are in the town?
I
Don't know.
don't know.
So any other questions? And no other...
Hi, my name is Hatren.
Can you spell that?
I live in Chuchuan, North Livingston.
Can you spell your last name?
Hatren. When you laugh, you know my name. Ha.
Thank you.
I would like to ask you, how many the customer outside, you said?
The testimony, Mr. Tran, was that he's currently permitted to have 60 customers seated outside, which is according to the resolution that was previously adopted by this board.
Okay, 60 people outside. When you have party, the people they outside, they're smoking, they talk louder. Can you stop them? Or children, they run around. Can you stop them?
Yeah. I mean, it's not related to the testimony on whether or not he's going to
That's
control the
because
children, but I
when you
think
sit the
that's...
billboard, they're talking like, they're lousy.
Certainly, if there are noise violations going on at any location, whether it's here or any place else, that will be enforced by code enforcement. But right now, under the prior approvals, they're allowed 60 seats outside. To the extent that, to the extent that that becomes, that people are being overly loud, then that can be enforced by code enforcement.
But why they come out, they talking, they laugh, they smoking? How you feel when you live going there? Why? What, can you tell them don't smoking?
They're certainly allowed to go to the premise. They're allowed to go to the premises, and they're allowed 60 seats right now.
I don't feel about 25 years ago, I don't know, I see what happened that, It's noisy, the smell stinky. Why?
Yeah, and do you have any questions? Any more questions?
Yeah. I asked, why you do smoking like that? Smell very bad.
Do any other? Thank you. Okay, with that, no more questions. This is your opportunity.
Is he rested? No more witnesses?
Yeah, there were no more.
I have no other witnesses.
So this is the opportunity for anybody that wants to make sworn statements for or against the application. This is your opportunity. Yes, no? Correct. Yep.
Scott Cashel, 14 Mansfield Court.
Did you offer comments previously? Were you sworn in previously?
In the past?
Yeah, why don't we just swear them in?
Yes.
Swear.
Just swear them in
Raise your
again.
right hand. Swear testimony about to give this matter be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
All right, give us your full name and your address.
Scott Cashel, 14 Mansfield Court. So I think we were trying to get closer to living together in the community because we're neighbors. There are still some concerns. Noise was brought up. Garbage delivery or garbage pickup is done between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m., 3 to 4 nights a week, and then 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. on daily basis as well. Not quite sure why there's so much activity that late at night. I have security footage of that if that needs to be seen. The parking, we've been talking about this forever. They decided to park on both sides of McClellan Street. It's now down to one lane. I think you all know about Livingston Avenue and McClellan there. It's a fairly dangerous corner. I think from my personal view, I've seen 3 accidents at the traffic light. And last weekend, there was a pretty nasty accident because I think part of that condition was having the single lane on McClellan Street. So I still think this needs to be seriously considered on how we deal with the parking issue. And I think, Mr. Klein, you've made that statement once or twice that we have a parking issue here.
Well, I think, we do have a representative from the council here, and I think that they can certainly discuss putting up, no parking in certain areas. But that's something for, maybe.
I mean,
There were 2 things that I have brought to our town manager. One has been additional code enforcement, so that possibly on weekends and on times where the current code enforcement is not around, that someone be available to enforce the rules that have been placed by the township. I do find that that's an issue. And 2, we can certainly, I did, in the previous testimony, some pictures were shown that showed that some of the people were parking in a way, I think it's at the roundabout. They're parking on the, it's like a curved side, and they're parking right on the curb where you can't see when you turn in. So maybe considering, Barry, is there a possibility to put some signs on that area? We're making one-sided parking so that
Yeah, no,
is-
and we have explored, and obviously the challenge is, right now, they can park on Mansfield, at
Correct.
certain
I think
areas
it's
on
Mansfield, the one-
McClellan. Certainly, the council could consider in limiting parking, no parking. There's been discussion of potential permit parking, because obviously if you make it no parking, that impacts the residents, and all of a sudden you want to have people over and they can't park on your street. We can look into all those. I believe should already be, and I know there's even state laws in effect, whether there's a sign or not a sign, parking too close to an intersection. So these people that park like right on the corner, they should, and I'll certainly address that with the police. That's not even a code enforcement issue, and there are police on 24/7. So I will definitely pass that along and would encourage anyone that if you see that, by all means, call the PD and they'll radio the cop in that district to go, and if there's somebody parked there, to ticket them.
Yeah, I mean, they put those signs up, but it's still leaving Mansfield Court and any of the driveways that are in there when the festivities are going on. It's hard to see, really hard to see. And I made this statement once, I'll say it again, it wasn't a question of if, but when. We had the when last weekend. Luckily, nobody was hurt, I don't believe. But it was a pretty serious wreck on the corner there. And when you come off of Livingston Avenue, I mean, everybody here sees it, that's a one-lane road now. So you have to wait pretty far down, and people have to decide independently who goes up and who comes down. And it's, people are relatively patient, but it's definitely it's a safety concern.
So
that I
that's
think we
something
all
I will
have.
definitely bring up to the council for discussion about how there could be some relief in that area.
Yeah, and we've talked about it a lot. I just don't know what the answer is.
And putting up no parking signs, can get tricky as well, because you tend to then just push the parking to another part of the street. So it's, trying to balance what works and what is safe and how to,
Completely understood, but right
it gets a little bit more
now, right
complicated,
now,
but-
it is not a safe situation. That's a safe statement. I don't think anybody here, I mean, you live right up the street. You've been on the road. You know what it's like on a Friday or Saturday or Sunday. It's just, again, people come off the road fast. We've all seen it. And then the question again on noise ordinance is, can you do garbage pickup between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m.? Is that allowed in
I
town?
made a note of that, and that is not, I got to confirm, but I assume this is a private hauler they have coming, because
They do.
certainly our collection company cannot pick up at that hours, and
I spoke to them,
definitely
and
made
they
a
do.
note of that, and we'll look into that.
They spoke to them, and they do not. They've assured me it wasn't them. But that's, that's what we're looking to get here. I mean, we're going to be neighbors for probably a long time. We want to see how we can figure this out, but these are the things, the Friday, Saturday night, the noise is, it came up last time, and I've had to go out in my yard and ask people to kind of please, 11 o'clock at night, 11:30, when restaurant people leave, and I get it. They've had some wine, they've had some food, and they can sit in the backyard or in the parking lot and speak and noise at night, as you know, travels
Carries.
a lot more than during the day. I think that's what I got for today.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Hi,
Your name, sir?
Jeff Lickstein, 46 Heron Road, Livingston.
Raise your right hand. You swear testimony you're about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do. So my first question is, with regard to the parking spaces, I know somebody said try to be patient, we're going to get to those. If those parking spaces that say no parking here, or they're limited, someone said 14 spaces or so, why does a resolution have to come out if those were illegally put up? Shouldn't that be immediately done, especially in a safety situation?
Right, they are not allowed up there. They shouldn't be there.
Okay. Okay, so I came to this just to support a friend of mine, and I know this was raised probably about 6 months ago. This has been going on a long time. That parking space issue of the no parking was raised then, and I said the same thing. So this should be done tomorrow. This has nothing to do with tonight's proceedings or the resolution. They should be taken down tomorrow. That frees up spaces and hopefully prevents an accident. The second thing I wanted to say with regarding the town ordinance, I know was quoted many times, that they are within the town ordinance for the number of spaces based on the businesses that are there. Public safety should come first. Maybe the town ordinance needs to be looked at, or maybe there needs to be a carve-out, an addendum for public safety situations that have to be looked at differently. Because with the right spaces, if they're still making a one-lane street there on McClellan, then you have to bring back the valet parking to get people off-site. I came here in 1979, and while I wasn't driving at that point, I got to tell you, I lived on Cherry Hill, pretty much around the corner. I've never seen it like that. That is incredibly dangerous. and I know there've been 3 or 4 accidents, the fact that nobody's gotten hurt is a miracle. So while I'm not saying they're in violation of the 40 from the ordinance perspective, the town needs to fix that before somebody really gets hurt. But the signs, they should be down tomorrow. Have the police pull them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hypothetically speaking, if the council, because you've asked me to go back to the council, if the council were to institute permitted parking, what would be your resolve to fixing the situation with the parking on the streets, Mr. D'Souza?
I really don't know, ma'am. It's a public street. Yourself, I, or any customer or any resident guests that come to their homes, they're able to park on the street. So that's out of my, that's something I can't police, nor my parking attendant can police. I think that's something that the police has to, police themselves for regarding that. I mean, that's not my obligation.
Anybody else?
I just have they brought up with the outdoor. I'm happy that the outdoor seating is going down to 41.
Yep.
Again? Gail Kelly, 225 North Livingston Ave. Gail Kelly, 225 North Livingston
I
Ave.
swear the testimony you're about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm excited that the seating is going to go down to 41. As far as smoking outside, I just pulled up the New Jersey Smoke-Free Air Act, and it is prohibited in restaurants that are outside. And if you are to smoke, it should be 25 to 50 feet away from the restaurant. So they should not be smoking. I've gone to outdoor seating. Nobody's smoking. So that needs to be enforced. And second, with the 41, are they going to be maybe selling the rest of the tables and chairs, or how are they're going to get rid of them? Maybe we can buy them, but anyway, just trying to find a little humor. But yeah, the smoking, I was like, whoa, no, that has to be enforced. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. And they should not be. It is not registered. It's a restaurant. Is it now a banquet hall? Like, do they have that in their, is it now, are they asking to become a banquet hall? Because I have seen and heard, literally my house was shaking from the music that was blaring. Now, are they being on their best behavior at this moment? Yes, I will attest to that. But as soon as we walk away and you guys grant them whatever they want, all bets are off again. So, it's like they're doing what they're supposed to do right now. But, I mean, I have a small house. I could not hear my TV. I was like, what's going on? I had to turn it up to like 70. And then I had to call the police. And the police came and told them to stop the party. It was way after 11 o'clock and crazy. So my vote is the no smoking, get rid of the tents. I mean, I'm happy that it's not the gas station. I will be honest. I'm glad about that. This is much better, and I appreciate the business there. But when it does affect our parking and safety, and then our air, we got enough problems from Canada. We don't need it coming from our own town. Anyway, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm sorry I talked out of turn.
It's okay. No, it's fine.
Actually, a school teacher.
It's fine.
Very good rule follower.
It's fine.
I can attest to that. Yes.
Hello, Brian Sklar, 11 Mansfield Court. I don't know if you need to swear in.
Spell your last name.
SKLAR.
You swear affirm the testimony you're about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. I just wanted to reiterate some of the points that have been made this evening from my neighbors. It's become such a dire situation from my point of view, because we've made these points time and time again, and we've just seen this past week, and I believe I emailed several of you with a picture and further description of our concerns. But it's virtually impossible when cars are lined up, parked on East McClellan, coming out of our cul-de-sac to see if cars are coming in either direction. And as Scott Kushel indicated, we're very lucky no one was seriously hurt, as far as we're aware. That luck is gonna run out if changes aren't made. And I understand that there are certain legalities to the parking in terms of how far back a sign can be from the curb, but throwing that out for now, and just looking at the pure safety, even if it's within the 25 feet from the curb, it's still incredibly dangerous, and it is a public safety matter, and someone is going to die if this situation isn't corrected. And we wouldn't have that issue if the parking situation was resolved. There are too many cars that come, there's not enough spots in the lot to accommodate it, so they overflow into our street. We've been trying to get along as good neighbors with Mr. D'Souza, Mr. Patel. There seems to be a lack of good faith on their part. Mr. D'Souza just said it's not his obligation to assist with the parking. Well, I would argue it is your obligation. You are a business proprietor in our neighborhood, and you do have a responsibility to help out with that. So just to close off, I'm admittedly cynical when points are agreed to here, like in the February council, when points are agreed to say take down signs, but it's been 4 months or so since then. No signs have been taken down. None of the points that we agreed to back in February as a compromise, none of those points have been executed on Mr. Patel and Mr. D'Souza's end. And I lack faith that the 41 seats will be abided to. So I just would implore the council to try and find a solution that benefits not just Mr. Patel and Mr. D'Souza, but the residents itself, and especially take into consideration the public safety considerations. It's going to be a big problem if it's not already. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sklar.
I just asked a question? I forgot. If the 41 with the outside, once the state says the tents don't have to be outside, then the tent comes down?
Correct.
Okay, I just went.
Ronnie Bond, oh, right hand, wrong hand. Ronnie Bonder,
Do you swear the testimony you're about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
correct.
All right,
Yes,
give
it
me
is.
Your
Yeah.
full name, address, spell your
Ronnie
name.
Bonder, 17 Mansfield Court. Now, I want to thank Gail for bringing out those points. Those are all valid points. But I also want to add to it that Mr. D'Souza, I do want to compliment him on the landscaping. It is, it's beautiful, you know, compared to the gas station we had. I love it. It's really a nice addition neighborhood. The only not nice addition to the neighborhood is, of course, the extra cars, okay? We had a lady, you know, came around, I'm on Mansfield Court, and I guess you saw the sign that says for residents only, because she was really nice, polite. She said, can I park here? And I said, no, go across the street to Brandon. So I said, you know what, because, and I'm going to tell you the truth, if this doesn't change, I'm going to stand every Friday, Saturday, if I have to be naked, I will, and tell people they can't park there, because this is ridiculous. It's gone too long, it's crazy. Now, Mr. Patel moved in Since 2014, in the original agreement, he was supposed to erect a fence that goes alongside that southern property that would also block me from looking at your van, delivery van. Well, you never put the darn fence up. You put up the lights against the thing. You put up the signs, all against or nothing. You don't ask for permission. You do what you want to do. And this is the kind of neighbors we get. Now, what are we supposed to do? Okay? Now, you love codes. So, there's a New Jersey code, 170-92.1, states that the negative and the positive criteria has to be taken into consideration when you're approve a variance. Is this a positive impact? No, it's a negative impact on our neighborhood, on our street. Now, there is a code in New Jersey that says that.
But
So
there's
you
no
have a
but there's no
reason.
variance here being requested. The only variance being requested is for the shed.
Yeah, but I'm saying is that, okay, so you hide behind all these little things. You hide behind the 48 parking spaces. Mr. Patel has not removed those pardon my French? They removed the signs of no parking, right? He has, Mr. D'Souza has somebody, or Mr. Patel has some, yeah, go park on the streets, because you can park on public streets. What kind of neighbor is that? This is crazy. Since 2014. All right? And these things were approved. No lights, no music, none of that. He rents his property, makes money on the rental, doesn't tell him that he can't have music, doesn't give him the paperwork. What kind of, arrangement is that? How does that not impact on our neighborhood? Is that right? That these people can get away over and over and over the years. I started with Mr. Patel when he moved in. He was an owner. He had one dumpster, and he only had one pickup a week. His garbage was flying into my backyard. I went to speak to Mr. Patel as a good neighbor. He said to me, well, I'm running a business. I said, you're running business in a residential area. You have the responsibility not to litter here. You have to pick up twice a week instead of just once a week. I mean, it's common sense. So anyway, you saw my frustration, and I've been frustrated since 2014. Now, we fought to fight that gas station, which was ugly, right? We're happy that that's gone. We love Mr. D'Souza's landscaping. We don't love the parking situation. I don't care what your numbers say. Your numbers say for every one car, what is it, three
seats.
Right.
Three
You know
seats.
that, 1 to 3. Come on, people will come individually. Where are they going to go park? If they decide to drive by themselves instead of one another person. Yeah, your stats, you're showing me that's what it is. But in reality, it doesn't work. Because it is, and especially if he starts parties, the lot size, the parking lot is too small. Tell him to get valet parking back and move those cars to wherever he wants to move them. But not on my street. I'm telling you, I'll be naked, and we'll get the newspaper over. It's crazy. Thank you for the time.
Thank you.
And I'm under oath. You put that down. I don't need-
You swear the testimony about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Your full name and address again.
Kim Cashel, 14 Mansfield Court. Just hearing what Ronnie had to say, seeing our other neighbors, Tom Eckelman and Amanda, seeing my husband's extreme frustration, this isn't a way to live. It's just not. It's really bad. And to see that anxiety and the stress and frustration day in, day out, we talk about it, it becomes a little obsessive. It's so dangerous. That East McClellan with the two sides, my daughter has been in accidents, not there, but she's terrified to leave our house, to leave and make that turn onto East McClellan. My parents were visiting this past weekend. My dad's a little older. I'm like, just inch out, because there's cars on both sides of the road. They can't see, and it's almost like you hold your breath and you hope no one's coming. So I'm just saying the amount of stress that this has led to over all these years is really upsetting. We're trying to be good neighbors and get along. I'm thrilled that there's a restaurant that's thriving, but it's causing a lot of undue, unnecessary stress on our end. So again, if you can take that into consideration, we'd very much appreciate it. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Hey, everybody. I guess this will probably be the last time we meet, hopefully. Raise my right hand.
Oh, no. If there's parking issue, you're going to get.
No, I'm done, mentally, physically.
Swear to give you the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth.
I do.
Full name and address.
Thomas Eckelman, Ekelman, 4 Mansfield Court, Livingston, New Jersey. The frustration that clearly is present, we almost have everyone from our block here, which is probably telling to the board that every single person from the block, with the exception of a renter and a family that lives, basically everyone is here. What does that tell the board? That on a small cul-de-sac, what does that tell the board? This is serious. We take this into, it's affecting us from both a enjoyment perspective and clearly from a safety perspective with the street parking. Some of it's enjoyment for our own personal benefit, of course. We bought a house in Livingston in a nice street, nice quiet cul-de-sac, and some of it now is safety. As we've seen, we've had traffic accidents. One was a hit and run. The guy hit a car, then proceeded to speed away, missing a wheel, which, Barry, you could maybe attest to. I don't know if it's an open investigation or whatever. It's an open investigation, so you can't. But he sped away. That's maybe 100 feet from my house. I've been asking this board for help. We've gone through every single, I know too much about the town at this point. Parking, Councilman Begoli, they've had, Councilwoman Begoli, we've had, the police department has done traffic investigations. I can name you 2 of them that you said you were gonna bring it up. It's already been done twice. Chief Marshall, I have his personal cell phone number, not to cut you off.
No, and listen, I don't disagree with you, and I'm the newest councilwoman, right?
I know.
People have said that, not many have spoken before, but I do. Listen, at the end of the day, I've sat here, I've asked questions, and what I've gotten back is, it's not my thing to do. I could have as many seats as I want, as long as I don't seat more than 79. I've heard all the testimony. I'm listening to you. One thing I haven't heard is, I haven't heard what has been done to try to remediate your concerns at all. So it's disheartening that this is the way it has to go, but I don't believe that we have to consider the facts that are before us and how we're going to move forward with this resolution. That doesn't mean that as your councilwoman, the town's councilwoman, inclusive of Mr. D'Souza, that I don't believe that, obviously, there's a lot going on here, and I don't see any testimony that has been said while I've been sitting here of any type of relief being offered as neighbors. But we will consider what is before us today.
I understand.
Thank you.
And whether it's, just to continue just briefly, my hope is that the resolution will directly force implementation and removal of the things that we've discussed that are against ordinance or the original resolution, whether that be spotlights, lights that are up that should not be up, whether it be speakers, whether or not music is played or not, whether it be parking, no parking signs, whether they should be up or not.
Those things shouldn't be there to begin with. But the resolution will be clear on when these things, even though they shouldn't be there now, will be clear on when these violations have to be removed.
And what code enforcement increases can be done, since code enforcement is not in on a Saturday night. And I know you mentioned
I have
that.
stated that I have requested that code enforcement be added, but that, again, is up to our town manager.
I appreciate everyone's time, specifically the folks that I've been emailing for a very long time. Thank you, Mr. Klein.
Thank you.
John Bonder, 17 Mansfield Court.
Okay.
Swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Just for that.
Yes. Okay. I just want to go through a list of detriments. We have the lights that should have been fixed. They're not fixed. They're still shining. They're very bright. There's not much of a screen, of a evergreen screen to keep the light from shining at us. There was a stockade fence that was supposed to be built to screen out and provide some privacy to my neighbor in the back. And it also works for me because my property's on a corner there, and there is a garage or an old barn on the other property, but that barn doesn't cover the entire lot. It's just a piece of it. So that's not a reason for not building the stockade fence. Okay. Noise. There was a lot of noise there. People would park their cars, have their radios blasting in the car, and I actually had to go over and see who it was, and it happened to be a parking attendant taking a break. Restaurants are nice, but a constant smell of the cooking, everything else. You go out on your porch, on your deck, and you hope to get some fresh air. Well, guess what? It's not fresh air anymore. I don't think my hummingbirds came this year because there's too much in the air. And as far as the parking, well, you know what the parking is. We've talked about it. But your idea of permitted parking, it's something I've mentioned to some of my neighbors way back. I think that sounds good to me. I mean, give me 3 or 4 parking permits. I can have my son and his wife come over. I can have a friend come over. They can park on the street. No problem with that. So that's a solution that sounds good to me. All right? And if everyone on the block gets enough parking permits, we're okay with it. Now, the other blocks, they can speak for themselves. Okay? All right. So basically, there's too many detriments, and we're not getting anything. We're the guys who are being sacrificed for the restaurant. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I enjoyed this.
Any other? Seeing none. Are there any closing statements by the applicant's attorney or the interested party's attorney?
Very briefly, I heard from the people in the neighborhood. I live in that neighborhood, okay? And I'll add this gratuitously. Parking on McClellan is not wide enough to have 4 cars. Once you park on both sides, you can really only fit 1 car. The way to solve this problem, and it's not the applicant's problem, the ordinance, if you want input, you make parking on one side of the street. I can tell you for a fact that all of this is not from the restaurant. Sometimes there are people on McClellan who have parties, people park on both sides of the street. Excuse me, I'm speaking. There's also another gentleman who has parties, and they park in an intersection. So when you come out, you can't turn.
So,
there are things.
Can we summarize the case?
Summarize the case is that in order to do his business, the indoor and the concession that we made, which I heard again on the lights, we made the concession with, we entered into an agreement.
Well, it wasn't a concession, it wasn't allowed.
Well, no, there was some dispute as to.
There was no dispute, we've been through this. Okay, we've been through this, but we don't want to go through that.
We don't want to go through that,
Okay.
but in terms of the seating, I think that the concession by the tenant to fix the seating on the outside and the inside is a workable solution. You do not have any kind of flexibility. You don't have more chairs. You don't have more tables. You don't have more things to complicate the seating chart. The parking is not necessary, and I think it's a very reasonable suggestion. And I think that that was what the purpose of the testimony of the tenant was. And I think it's workable in order for this business to keep functioning. I'm not going to comment on the music or any of these other things, which are just not allowed. But in terms of the seating, and the seating is a workable solution that this board has heard testimony on, and it's a solution that I think they should adopt. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks again. I appreciate you guys and your willingness to hear our testimony. We're really just concerned with that one parking issue. The table issue, and we think that it's a workable solution. But again, I apologize for dragging you guys out to another meeting to have to hear this. I was hoping to keep it streamlined. It got a little bit longer than we had hoped. But again, we think it's a workable solution on that one particular issue.
So your three asks were the 79 indoors, 41 outdoors, the parking attendant only being on-site.
Right, just not to monitor off-site parking.
Okay.
And the table issue would
Table.
resolve itself if the parking, if the table mix were adjusted.
Okay.
That's all. And again, thanks again. I appreciate your time and your consideration.
Thank you. So the parties having had the opportunity to make closing statements, it appears to the chair that the applicant, all interested persons, and the board members have had reasonable opportunity to be heard, and that the evidentiary record of this hearing ought to be closed. Absent objection, in the absence of any motion for continuance, the evidentiary record is closed, and no further testimony or evidence shall be heard or received. I'd like to take just to give the board members up here just like a 5-minute break, and then we'll come right back. So we're not going anywhere. Just a couple of board members, give them a quick break, and we will, wrap up the hearing. Okay, we got everybody back. The board members shall now have the opportunity to state and discuss their views on the application prior to reaching a decision. So I will open it up to any of the board members.
My age gives me the opportunity to start off. So I'm going to do that. I mean, we're all in agreement that this has been a difficult and complex and very time-consuming operation. We gave non-binding guidance to our attorney back in February, and that was to prepare a resolution to approve the application with some conditions. Now, that guidance is not a decision by the board. It's obvious to you we haven't reached the decision. It's only an indication of what we thought we wanted the result to be when we gave that guidance. And now we have the opportunity to review the record and come to our conclusions. Now, the record before tonight shows a lot of things which you all have been remembering. That the storage shed behind the restaurant was installed in violation of the zoning ordinance and without approval by the board. The wall signs at the rear of the two shops have been operating with illumination in violation of the approvals granted in 2014. We have the issue of the restaurant having operated with as many as 89 seats indoors, then reducing to 79 because of the fire code. And that's still in excess of what the board approved. We know that music was played outdoor in violation of the resolutions. We know that there has been covering and enclosing of the outdoor seating area, and sometimes that was because of special state rules which allowed it, and that's why it's covered right now. There were 15 parking spaces that had signs limiting their use to customers of the shops. Now, the township code requires that signs that have conditions for parking require approval. The restaurant has been stacking cars in the southerly area of Lot 2 by putting them in the aisle that serves the existing approved parking spaces, thereby getting as many as 8 additional potential spaces for cars. Now, the applicant has agreed prior to tonight to do certain things which have not yet been done. Some have been done. For instance, the power to the 2 wall signs has been disconnected. And the applicant has agreed to install soffit signs, which will provide lighting of the sidewalk at the rear of the shops, and also wash the 2 wall signs with white light. They've agreed to remove floodlights on the rear of the Lot 55 building, where the shops are, and those that are on a utility pole on Lot 2, so that there will only be lighting that's been approved by the board. They agreed to plant understory shrubs along the rear property line of Lot 2 to improve the screening of the homes. They've agreed to remove any outdoor speakers at the restaurant and to comply with the code and board music prohibitions. They've agreed to reduce the number of parking spaces reserved for the shops to 5 on Lot 55 in the front yard and 4 at the back on Lot 2. And each sign would reserve that parking space for the shops for a period of 15 minutes by a customer, parking in the time frame from 4 p.m. to 7:30. They've agreed to install the 6-foot-tall stockade fence required since 2014. There is an agreement that if the shed is approved, it would be used to dry storage of pots and pans and kitchen equipment and table linens, no food products, no perishables. And then Mr. D'Souza, at the last session, added that the outdoor chairs could be stored there when not in use. So we have things that are starting to take shape. What's happened, as you well know, is that originally there was a request for very flexible seating arrangements, which would allow differences occurring indoors and outdoors, but the total never exceeding 120 seats. What we have tonight is an agreement that there would be a limit of 41 seats outside and a limit of 79 seats inside. And of course, the outdoor seating would only be during the period in which outdoor seating is allowed by the town. That is very encouraging because on December last year, although we now have an agreement that offered to us that there would be no more than 41 outside, Mr. D'Souza said, we have space outside for 120. We have ample space out on our patio, on our paved patio, that fits over 120 people. So, I think that the limit that's been suggested on the seating numbers is a benefit to the community, and it's something that we should be accepting. There's been an issue on the removal and storage of chairs, and again this evening we have Mr. D'Souza saying that the chairs and tables that are not being used outside during the period in which seating is not permitted, to the extent that they won't fit into the shed, they can be stored under the canopies that were built on the building without any difficulty. That, to me, is a very good idea, consistent with the general rules throughout the town on outdoor seating, which do say they have to be removed when the season ends. But that's because generally those seating areas are right up against the sidewalk. That's not the problem here. So there should be no requirement that the furniture be removed from the premises. They can safely be stored next to the building without any harm to anyone. On the other hand, the stacking of cars does present a problem. That's because stacked cars would be occupying and blocking the use of the aisle that's required to be between the cars that are parked in authorized spaces. The township parking ordinance requires that vehicles be parked only in clearly marked parking spaces. There's been no testimony that would justify permitting stacked parking. Now, I always have a problem when somebody is coming for a variance to approve a structure or something that's been in place without authority. But based upon the testimony I've heard about what the shed would be used for and could be used for, I think that the board could find that there's a public benefit to having it so that the board could grant the variance for the shed. Coming to another one of those howevers. Based upon what's been the non-compliant action of the applicant and the restaurant operator, plus what I consider to have been kind of weak credibility of some of their testimony and undertakings in the course of the hearings. I have considerable concern about whether or not there would be compliance with our resolutions and with the township ordinances and regulations. But the board strives to strike a balance between the interests of the community and the interest of the applicant business, and to strike a balance between their concerns. I think we can do that with a reduction in concern about compliance, by carefully crafting the conditions to any approvals that we grant, with anticipation that the conditions will be effectively enforced by the township. So, we can grant relief with conditions of approval that call for specific performance or compliance within a specific point of time, which is something that the chairman mentioned earlier. We can also include what are called continuing conditions. Those conditions have no limit on duration, so they can remain in force without a termination date or an event. Now, it just so happens the township code provides that if there is a violation of a continuing condition and it's not corrected, the violator will be subject to the imposition of a fine of up to $2,000 per day and/or imprisonment or a community service for up to 90 days. That risk, I think, should serve as an incentive toward compliance. We don't have to put that in our resolution. That's what the law will apply if there is a violation of a continuing condition. So, if I may, I would suggest that the board can find specifically that there have been sufficient proofs to justify the change in the number of seasonal outdoor seats, so that that change could be granted by the board. And the board could grant a variance to allow the shed to be 6 feet closer to the building than would ordinarily be required. And I think that we would find that the expert testimony establishes the meeting of the criteria for granting that variance. And I think that the board could also find that we can give permission for the furniture to be stored under the canopies of the building. The conditions are then always the catch. It takes time to do things once a resolution is adopted. Doesn't have to take an awful lot of time, but you may have to find contractors to do certain things. For instance, putting up the stockade fence. Maybe if we have a condition that it has to be put up, it has to be put up within 30 days. The planting of the landscaping. At this time of year, it could be done within 30 days. The electrical disconnection and removal of the floodlights and spotlights probably could be done within 20 days. So that would be reasonable, in my opinion. The speakers. They could be, should have been removed already. But if we say 15 days, that gives plenty of time to get it done. I would say in all these things, those timeframes will be measured from the date that the resolution is adopted. The pole-lighted fixtures, no, I'm sorry, the pole-lighted fixture that is on Livingston Avenue, which was hit by a vehicle at some point in time and is supposed to be repaired or replaced, that may take a lot longer. I would say 60 days would be reasonable. The condition of removal of the signs for the reserved parking. I doubt if the replacement signs, which are more specific, have yet been ordered. They should be. I don't know how it would take, how long it would take to get that. So I would say 45 days might be appropriate. Tents and canopies would be prohibited except when authorized by the state in an emergency. All right, those are all the conditions that relate to time. Continuing conditions. The outdoor seating time period would have to match what the ordinance calls for, which means it starts on March 1st and ends on September 30th. It ends on September 30th. During the period from October 1 to the last day in the following February, you have only indoor seating, no outdoor seating. The provision on when you can't have the outdoor tents or covering, I've already mentioned, that would be a continuing condition. The prohibition of live, recorded, or transmitted music is a continuing condition. If there are any future changes in terms of signs saying who can park here, they have to get the appropriate approval, either from us, if it's more than 3 feet above the ground, or from the zoning officer if it's lower. Stacked parking. I don't think it has to be prohibited because it would require a variance in order to do it. But if the board thinks it is safer to make it a continuing prohibition condition, it would work. We would probably want to have a continuing condition that those wall signs will never be relit. I don't think, I do think rather, that 15-minute parking requirement would be a continuing condition. And the provisions on what the shed could be used for would be a continuing condition. I think we've had a clearance of thoughts as to the role of the attendant, and that should be a continuing condition. There was some talk at one of the sessions about the possibility of having an employee's car parked parallel to the environmental monitoring station, but there's absolutely no testimony as to how that would work, whether it could be done. So perhaps we would have an express continuing prohibition of the parking there. And it's been suggested in the course of this evening that there be a continuing that there be a condition which should be continuing, prohibiting smoking. And as it would follow the state law, assuming that we have a clear identification of what the state law is. And of course, all the conditions in the prior resolutions that aren't superseded by whatever we adopt here would continue in force and effect. So I would suggest to the board that we're in a position to approve the application on these terms, subject to a memorializing resolution.
Peter, what about garbage pickup?
Thank you. What about garbage pickup? Noisy garbage pickup.
I think all garbage pickup is noisy.
Yeah, in almost every application where we've had a restaurant or any kind of food service, we've had a specific condition as to the hours of pickup. Does anybody remember better than I what it is? It's usually early in the morning, as I recall.
What does the town allow, 6 a.m.?
I think it's no earlier than 6 a.m.
That's what I thought. And, right, now, what time do you want to stop in the evening?
It's October 30.
10?
Oh, did I?
9? 10?
No, then it says, oh, it's
So no garbage pickup between 10 and 6?
That's right. Yeah, that's what I have here. I didn't speak right. Our very alert town council member
We can do it between,
said I said outdoor is from March 1st to September 30th. I misspoke. It's October 30th. That's why I said, and then starts November 1st. There would have been a 30-day gap, but we wouldn't know what was going on. Thank you.
anything else, Peter?
I hope not.
So think about no garbage pickup between 10 and 6? Does that work for everybody?
10 p.m. to 6 a.m.?
Yeah.
Sounds good to me.
Any other comments?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. First of all, Jill and I were just sitting here, and we could listen to Peter all night. I mean, that was beautiful. Thank you, Peter. It's fantastic. And hopefully that resolves any issues with anybody getting naked, I hope. But, you know, exit 6 off of 280 has been closed for like ever. So I've had to take exit 5A. So I don't usually go by Asado or that area, and I had to. And it's residential. I mean, so this is really a residential area. So, and most applications we see are most successful when the business, the developer, whoever works with the neighbors. So it's really just about being a good neighbor. I mean, there's a lot of issues: the lights, the smoking, the parking, the garbage. I mean, it all could work if you work with the neighbors. And I don't think this is hard, and I think Peter just summarized it beautifully. You know, we are limited here at the planning board level. We only can do what we can do. But now, you know, that's why we have representatives from the town council and the town manager here. So certainly I think the use of the shed is going to be helpful. I think we've resolved a lot of issues. I think the number of seats are going to work. Yeah, and so I would support everything that Peter just said, and hopefully there's peace in the land and everlasting joy moving forward. But most ordinances, you know, when I sat on the town council for a while, it became very clear to us that, you know, most ordinances are only enforced when you call and you tell someone about it. So if I cut down all the trees in my backyard and nobody tells anybody, then I'm okay. But if my neighbors call and complain, then I'm going to get in trouble. So, you know, you have to, sadly, unfortunately, you might have to make some phone calls. But that's how it kind of works. But I'm in support, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Turn your mic on.
Is there any way to hold or make the approval of the variance requested tonight contingent upon the completion of those items which should have been completed based on our last approvals? In other words, rather than say, sure, you can have the shed tonight, we approve it, but not until you do this, this, and this.
Well, I guess the problem is the shed's already there.
I know that.
That's the problem.
But it's not supposed to be there.
Right, so the problem is the shed is there.
What goes
so-
up goes down. What are we going to do so that we're not sitting here in 4 months having these fine folks say the lights are still on or the music is still on and so on and so forth? We haven't done well in following through on our last approval
Well, I
or on
think-
the ordinances in town.
I think that Chairman Emeritus's suggestions of, making them continuing conditions with significant fines and penalties may be a real motivation to do that. And provided that, we can, make sure that code enforcement is there to assist.
Yeah, and I don't know if this may be a good segue to my comments. I did want to address, certainly some of the neighbors here, I think, are aware of the tortured history of this whole situation. But there have been comments about nobody's doing anything, why didn't anyone do it, why are the signs still up? And just by way of background, when a number of these issues began to come to light, it's probably going 2-3 years now, at least certainly brought to my attention. And then we kind of dug into this further, found the old resolutions, I was not here at the time, began to identify some of these conditions that had not been complied with. They did go the route of code enforcement. Code enforcement initially issued notice of violation, eventually issued summonses. There was a court date. Unfortunately, due to a conflict, the court case got transferred to Millburn. At that time, the applicant owner represented to the judge in Millburn that they planned to file an application with the planning board to seek clarification or relief or something of some of these conditions. The judge accepted that, and that's the reason why we're still here today. They did file the application, I believe, back in August or September. We had hearings in October. We had another hearing in December. Then we had a hearing in February, and we gave the guidance to the board's attorney, who then produced the draft resolution, and I think we were ready to go on that in April, and then there was a request to reopen the record, and so here we are. So on the one hand, I want to, let everybody know that we were not ignoring this, and we were proceeding. I'm as frustrated as anyone else, and certainly can commit on behalf of the town that once we get over this finish line and have these conditions with firm deadlines and clear black and white, they will be enforced. Equally important, I want to just express my appreciation to all the residents for their patience. I know this has been a long and, again, tortured process. To a number of you, I also want to make clear, and I thought it was sort of conveyed, but maybe not, because I continue to get emails. I had great dialogue with the residents and also with the owner as we were trying to resolve some of these issues. But once an active and open planning board application was filed, under the law, I'm precluded from then having separate conversations with any interested party, so that's why I couldn't continue and did not have any conversations with the owner, as they could attest to as well. They had meetings and I did not attend. All that having been said, I think an enormous amount of progress has been made. I think the resolution, we will make sure it has the teeth, all the conditions. I won't rehash everything, but the lights, the reserved parking, the fence, all the things that should have been done will be done, and we will make sure they get done. And then lastly, as it relates to just the one variance that is requested, I think in addition to the benefits of having the shed, I think the real issue, it's not a question they can't have a shed, it's the location of the shed, and I believe at a prior hearing, we determined that if the shed was actually moved far enough away from the building, it would result in the elimination of one, possibly two parking spaces, and obviously I think that's the last thing anybody wants, is to lose any parking spaces. So I think that's an additional reason to support the variance. And based on that, I'm in favor of approving this with, again, very strict conditions and timelines and deadlines.
Thank you. Is there anybody else? So with that, Right, so we can proceed with a motion to approve or disapprove. Peter, you had mentioned all the conditions. I was going through our notes in our prior draft, which touched upon all of them, plus added a few more. So I think we've covered them all, so I'll leave it up to you.
I'll make a motion to approve subject to a memorializing resolution.
And just to clarify, it's basically all the conditions listed in the original draft resolution, the change to reflect 79 indoor seats year-round, 41 outdoor seats during outdoor seasonal dining, and limited to that number of
I would
patrons.
have some problems with some of the conditions in the
Prior draft.
resolution that we got. That's why I spelled out
Okay,
everything now.
that's subject to any clarification, and I certainly agreed with everything that you said.
In making the number of these conditions continuing conditions, and then adding the others that were not in the draft that have already been mentioned. The smoking issue, the no garbage pickup, specifically, and then the others that were mentioned.
No naked ladies.
Please put that in the ordinance.
So I think
You know, this will be on
we have
Facebook.
a motion and we have a second.
Online, the video.
And no further comments, so if you could take the roll, please.
Mr. Klein?
Yes.
Ms. Begoli?
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry.
Ms. Begoli? Mr. Ratner? Mr. Reber?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Ms. Wishnu? Mr. Fernandez?
We'll have Joe voting for Santola. Yeah. And I'm a yes, and I think it's important that the applicant, heard what's been mentioned by the board and, when compliance needs to be completed by. So I hope that everyone's been paying attention.
And if the applicant wants to save some time and do some of the removals before the resolution is adopted, I don't think anybody would object.
Yes. Signs of good faith.
Okay, with that, if I can have a motion to adjourn?
Can you unplug that, my cord over there?
Then we're staying.
The only-
All in favor? Thank you. We are adjourned.